Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, welcome to With Jewish Youth. And I'm certainly happy that you're tuned in tonight because you're going to get the thrill of your life. We have one of the fighting rabbis, the militant rabbis, but not, God forbid, militant in the sense that the word militant means. This is a man who fights God's battle, a battle for Yiddishkeit and a battle for true Judaism. His name is known to everybody. He's known from one end of the world, I think, to the other. Rabbi David B. Hollander, the rabbi of the Mount Eden Center in the Bronx. He's the president of the Rabbinical Alliance of America. He is an associate professor of sociology at the Long Island University. He is a famous author, lecturer, radio and TV personality, a world traveler. He is one of the finest speakers you have ever heard. He is a fearless spokesman for Orthodox Judaism in America. And this is the one man that I could say who has locked horns with spiritual leaders of conservative and reform leadership before audiences, live audiences, and radio. Rabbi Hollander was good enough to take time out of his extremely busy schedule to be with us tonight to speak to our people. And this getting closer to the Yontif of Shavuos, I think it's proper to have a young man in his person to really come forth and speak as perhaps a Moshe Rabbeinu would speak in this generation. And so, welcome to our program With Jewish Youth, Rabbi Hollander. It's great to have you on board. We are not always this fortunate to have men of your caliber, but we are certainly grateful that you made time available to be with us tonight. Rabbi Hollander, I think that we ought to start off with one of the very sensitive questions, and that is, I would like for you to define for my radio audience the role of the Orthodox rabbi in America today. I think we are all very much concerned with the chaos that's going on in the world. We ought to get a definite interpretation as to the role of the Orthodox rabbi.
Rabbi Hecht, I'm pleased to be with you in this program. I would like to ask you, do you want me to tell you what the role of the rabbi is or what it should be?
Rabbi Hollander, hard to keep up with you. I think you may as well give it to us both ways.
Well, first I will tell you what it should be. Everyone knows what the role of an Orthodox rabbi should be. He should be the person who stands constantly on guard to make certain that the people are guided in their life in accordance with the teachings of the Torah. And in order to carry out that role, he must be unafraid, courageous, and above all, he must not be interested in his own future career. To that end, he must be able to speak out clearly and truthfully on all issues that arise. For there is no issue in the life of an individual Jew or in the lives of the Jews collectively that is not subject to Torah guidance and direction. And we have numerous statements in the Torah, in the Talmud, about the role of the rabbi. Everyone knows that he's the one who is supposed to teach my people to distinguish between that which is holy and profane, between that which is permitted and that which is prohibited. And of course, above all, a rabbi must be a person to whom people can come and unburden their deepest problems, their deepest spiritual crises. And he must generate among people a confidence within them that they would come to him with these problems, looking upon him as a selfless, dedicated servant of the Lord and therefore a servant of his people.
That's what he should be. Now, what is he?
Well, I will say there are quite a few Orthodox rabbis who are striving and succeeding to some degree to live up to this standard. But we cannot conceal the truth. We are living in a success-oriented society, and it has invaded the realm of religion to a very large extent, so that in a real sense, today many rabbis, even alas in the Orthodox camp, will withhold opinions, clear, unequivocal opinions, about which they have no doubt. But because these views may be unpopular, and because it may hurt him, not only with his people. Strangely enough, Rabbi Hecht, we are on the air. Maybe you will censor some of these remarks, but I will tell you. The rabbi some decades ago had to be afraid about his security within his congregation, that his people might object if he takes a clear stand on certain issues. I don't think that that fear is real today. Today, many rabbis fear not their congregations, but the reaction of the organized Jewish community, perhaps of the very school from which he comes, and perhaps of the rest of the rabbinate with whom he's associated. And this is where the problem of the rabbi in carrying out his role today is becoming increasingly difficult. But as I said, there is a minority, a courageous minority, who do carry out that role despite these difficulties.
Rabbi Hollander, thank you for this interpretation and explanation. It's certainly, I'm sure it's going to be an eye-opener to many. But based upon what you've just concluded with, your last remarks, would you then say that orthodoxy is gaining in America, both from the rabbinic standpoint and perhaps from the layperson standpoint? Are we getting ahead as far as orthodoxy, or are we sinking? And I would like you to address yourself, Rabbi Hollander, to the overall picture throughout the United States. And I know that you've been a man, I think, that's been in every state of the union, and I think you're qualified to answer this question.
Rabbi Hecht, there is no doubt that from the standpoint of congregations, for example, orthodoxy has lost a great deal of ground. In the changes that have taken place in the urban community with people moving out to the suburbs, there has been a drastic drop in the number of Orthodox congregations. I might say to you, I know people, Orthodox Jews, who are personally still Orthodox in every important respect, moving into a suburban community where they did not take sufficient care in advance to make sure that there is an Orthodox synagogue there. They do attend services, as they call it, or they do attend or become members affiliated with non-Orthodox congregations, particularly of the conservative variety. And when you ask them sometime how do they reconcile this with their personal Orthodox commitment and belief, they evade the question. So therefore, I will say that from congregation-wise, there has been a drop in the Orthodox impact, especially when we go away from the great well-known centers, urban centers of America, such as New York and 2 or 3 other communities. If you are talking about the numbers of Jews that are affiliated with different kind of congregations, I will also concede that perhaps in numbers, the affiliated of the non-Orthodox may be more. Certainly they are more affluent and more and greater in number that are affiliated with non-Orthodox congregations than with Orthodox congregations. However, I will say this: Judaism never depended on the number of people that were affiliated, only on the depth of their commitment. And when it comes to commitment, neither the conservative nor the reform so-called branch of the House of Israel, I don't want to call it Judaism because I do not believe they represent Judaism, and I must add here parenthetically that I'm not here in any way leveling my scathing remarks at the people who are in the reform and conservative movement, because they are more or less innocent and they think that they are doing the right thing. I am directing my sharp criticism at their spiritual leaders who have knowingly misled their people, making them believe that they are somehow within the camp of Jewish tradition and fidelity to Judaism. So I say that when it comes to depth of commitment, nobody could hold a candle to the record of the Orthodox community in America could point to. Because if there is a youth today in America, a Jewish youth, and I don't mean only teenagers and adolescents, but I mean young married couples, many of whom are already third-generation Americans, who are strictly Orthodox in their life, no matter what part of the country they live in. Where do they come from? They come from the Orthodox community. True that the conservative and reform have huge youth organizations, but they do not have a commitment to Judaism. I mean, they go to conventions, they have gatherings and lectures, but in terms of commitment to Shabbos, to mitzvahs, to dietary laws, to Taharas HaMishpoche, all these pillars of Judaism without which the whole edifice must collapse, only the Orthodox can point to that. So that in answering your question, there is no doubt that the only Jewish camp in America that can point to the glorious fact that it has reared a generation, not only one generation, but already several, but a generation of Americans, thorough Americans, who at the same time are learned and pious and committed to Torah Judaism or Orthodox Judaism, the two terms are synonymous, then I say from that standpoint, only the Orthodox Jewish camp can point to success in the American Jewish community.
I grant you about the success, but is it growing or not? Tell me.
I think it is growing, because by the very fact that I told you, and that I told your audience, that when it comes to young people, that we are the only camp that has young people that observes Judaism. The conservative and reform camp have young people, but they are not committed even to the conservative or reform so-called practically non-existent standard of Judaism. Even to that, they are not committed. Whereas the youth in America, interestingly enough, the Orthodox Jewish youth in America have outstripped their parents and grandparents in many cases in their commitment to Orthodoxy.
Okay, so now we got it straight. In your opinion, that this new generation that's coming up are more dedicated and committed to Judaism and, of course, Orthodoxy than perhaps any other. All right, but you have made mention about the conservative and reform movements, and you have sort of spoken a little bit down about them, to use a kind word. But everybody knows that you have been the forerunner in this battle, because you were the one who advocated that an edict be passed or adopted against the participation of Orthodox rabbis with any other member of the so-called rabbinate who is not an Orthodox rabbi. Now, I would like to ask you the $64,000 question, and this has been thrown at us from time to time. The question that the conservative Jew or the Reformed Jew asks us is, Rabbi, wouldn't you say that a half a loaf is better than none? And so, Rabbi Hollander, I think you are the man to answer this question for all of us who are confronted with this question. What is your opinion on that?
Rabbi Hecht, first let me say that I believe that there is maybe some misunderstanding as to the edict that I advocated. I advocated an edict that Orthodox rabbis should not be members in rabbinic or synagogal bodies which recognize a Judaism other than Orthodox Judaism. To be specific, the two organizations that were mentioned in writing in the text of the edict, which was issued 18 years ago here in New York, the organizations mentioned were the New York Board of Rabbis and the Synagogue Council of America, because these organizations, by their very title, are religious organizations in quotation marks, and if you associate with them in your capacity as a rabbi or in your capacity as a synagogue, you are admitting that there is a Judaism outside the authority of the Torah. And this is the reason for that edict, and this is what I've been advocating. I am not advocating that we cannot belong with non-Orthodox Jews to general Jewish organizations that do not function under a religious banner, so to speak. Now, that is a distinction that has to be drawn, has to be recognized. Now, as to the other part of your question about is a half a loaf better than no loaf? Now, all I can tell you is that if you're talking about bread, you're absolutely right. Even a quarter of a loaf is better than no loaf. But if you are talking about truth, then everyone knows that a half a truth is worse than a whole lie, because it has the veneer of truth and will therefore be passed up as and accepted as proper and valid truth. And therefore it is very important. You mentioned Shavuos in your introductory remarks. If I may, in my capacity as a rabbi, tell you that in one of the 10 Commandments it is written, thou shalt not declare the name of thy God in vain. And the rabbis say in the Talmud that when this particular commandment was uttered, the whole world shook and trembled as compared to the other commandments. Why? Because it is one thing to be false, to deceive. In general things, it is bad, it is wrong. But when you use God, when you use the Torah, when you use Judaism as a label under which you pretend to present the real article, and actually you are presenting a bogus, fraudulent imitation of the real thing, then the whole world must shake and tremble, because then truth itself is under a heavy siege and attack, and there is no opportunity to return. If a Jew drifts away from Judaism, no matter how far he has drifted, as long as he knows that he has drifted, you can expect him back. But when you have spiritual leaders, I don't call them rabbis, of the Reform and Conservative movement, when you have spiritual leaders who tell the people are innocent, they don't know any better, they tell them this is Judaism, then a terrible trembling of the spiritual edifice of the house of Israel has taken place, which is responsible for intermarriage and assimilation. Responsible, it's ridiculous. You and I know who is advocating and promoting intermarriage. One would think that intermarriage is a case where a young man comes home and tells his parents, I'm about to get married to a non-Jewish girl, or a girl to a non-Jewish boy. That is not the classical case today. Today we have the Jewish clergy, especially of the Reform movement, who are actually performing marriages between Jews and non-Jews. And many times in participation with non-Jewish clergy. Now, it makes no difference to me. Actually, the presence of the non-Jewish clergyman doesn't aggravate the situation once there is a performance of a marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. But imagine that someone who calls himself a rabbi and speaks in the name of Judaism takes a young person, gives him the sanction of his performance. He thinks it is a sanction. Of course it's no sanction, but this young person or his family think it is better than no loaf at all. They say it's a half a loaf. He's not really an Orthodox rabbi, but it's better than nothing. And what is happening? The intermarriage, instead of being looked upon as a disaster for the Jewish family, is becoming accepted by many people. And who is responsible for this? The responsibility lies at the doorstep, not of the people who do it, but of the spiritual leaders of the two movements, who for the past decades have been telling the American Jew, you can be a good Jew without the Sabbath, without the dietary laws, without the tefillin, then why not with intermarriage?
I believe we all got the point, Rabbi Hollander. There's no doubt that we now begin to see what half a loaf of this kind can mean. As you said, if it was bread, it would be okay. Of course, the big problem is already now the new set of shilas that I, as a rabbi, have been getting recently is where people call me up and say that since there's going to be a mixed marriage, and the Mechatonim sent me an invitation, should I go, and if I go, what am I allowed to eat at this kind of a wedding? This has become the new question. But Rabbi Hollander, we cannot just speak about Orthodoxy in America. We also have Israel to be concerned with. And I know that recently, more than just recently, we have run into some very serious problems, as you know, with this whole business with who is a Jew, and with the general impact that the conservative and reform movements have tried to make into the Holy Land, and the terrible confrontations that have come because of it. And there have been many. And I think that you, as an authority on this subject, will be able to bring our audience up to the minute with the latest happenings and the threats that are confronting us, the problems that have jeopardized and are never jeopardizing our very existence in the Holy Land. Rabbi Hollander, I'd like you to deal with this subject now.
Well, of course I am somewhat familiar with the issue. As a matter of fact, I was one of four rabbis who, about 2 years ago, went to see Prime Minister Golda Meir with a petition bearing the signatures of perhaps 3,000 rabbis from throughout various parts of the world, pleading with her that she should take a stand and correct the the law of return, and all the laws affecting conversions, so that all should be done only in accordance with the halacha, with the Jewish law. But she has many adversaries to face. First of all, she has the problem of the conservative and reform temples and their spiritual leaders, who have, at least by implication, and I think much more than implication, threatened the Israel government with financial reprisals if it will yield to the demand of the Orthodox rabbinate that all matters affecting Jewish family life, conversion, and of course the identification of who is a Jew should be done only in accordance with the halacha. I have in front of me here a telegram which was printed in the Haaretz only about 4 or 5 days ago, the 12th of May, I see, so it's very, very close, where the various organizations of both the conservative and reform movements of America and of the world movements sent a telegram in which they say, and I read only a few lines, after they strongly protest the reports that they heard that the Israel government might yield to the demand of the halacha. They say the Rabbinical Assembly, United Synagogue of America, World Council of Synagogues, Central Conference of American Rabbis, Union of American Hebrew Congregations, and World Union for Progressive Judaism say that such changes or such accommodations to the demands of halacha shall not be given because it will affect the moral, political, and financial support of the state of Israel. Now, I think that any person could spell out exactly what that means. Now, here we have a situation, mind you, where Israel is so critical a time, with so many terrible external enemies are trying to tear her to pieces. At such a time, these people, who, although I do not recognize them as rabbis, of course not, but I would think that they have some sense of responsibility, some concern for the security of the state of Israel and of the Jewish people. They come along at such a time and they say, if you don't do it our way, then remember you are taking moral, political, and financial. You have to spell out what that financial means. It can only mean one thing to any person with common sense: financial support of the state of Israel. And I say, isn't it remarkable that even a man like the late Prime Minister Ben Gurion, who certainly could not be accused of having been an Orthodox Jew, he said that he saw to it and he carried it out while he was in authority, that all these laws affecting who is a Jew, Jewish identity, conversion, marriage, divorce, all of these must be under the chief rabbinate in Israel, under the Orthodox authority in Israel. And he did it not because he was an Orthodox Jew, but to preserve the unity of the Jewish people. For without that, if we have different standards of marriage and conversion, the Jewish people will be broken into little pieces and thereby rendered much more weak than they are at the present time. I cannot understand how people before God, before history, could get themselves to communicate such a message to the leaders of the Israel political parties. I might just add one more thing here, Rabbi Hecht, because it seems here for a moment that I'm very partisan about the reform and conservative spiritual leaders being against them, and I am against them for what they do to our people, because their people are my people. I am concerned about their people. They are my people, and they are misleading my people. But I must say that a large segment of the American Orthodox rabbinate bears a responsibility in this. Because when 18 years ago the edict was issued by all the Gedolei Torah of America and Israel that they should not be associated in rabbinic and synagogue bodies with the conservative and reform elements, spiritual leaders, they did not listen to that edict. And as a result, today, the Orthodox, the reform and conservative spiritual leaders, through their association with their Orthodox colleagues, feel themselves to be rabbis. And they say, what do you mean? My opinion on conversion, my opinion on marriage, and my opinion on divorce is different than yours, but it is equally valid in Judaism. For this The Orthodox rabbis must bear responsibility, and they must repent, and the one way of repentance is to sever that relationship. And you know that recently the Union of Orthodox Congregations of America has suspended their activities with the Synagogue Council of America, pending hopefully a withdrawal in a matter of a few months. And I should add, because I was critical about American Orthodox rabbis, that both the Agudas Horabonim and the Igud Horabonim, the Rabbinical Alliance of America, and the Union of Orthodox Rabbis of the United States and Canada never permitted any of their members to this day to be associated with the New York Board of Rabbis or the Synagogue Council of America. The time is near when the action of these two organizations, namely the Rabbinical Alliance and the Agudas Horabonim, will be hailed by the whole Orthodox Jewish community, and the Orthodox rabbis who did not heed that edict still have a time to repair that terrible breach and thereby bring about a true healing in the whole problem of the Giur Kahalocha, of conversion and who is a Jew, because all these things are tied in one with the other. If, and I finish with this, if we get back to the clear proposition, and this even those rabbis, Rabbi Hecht, who do belong to the New York Board in America, those Orthodox rabbis also admit that all these matters in Israel must be only under the aegis, the sole authority of the Orthodox rabbinate. But in order to drive home that point, they must take the dramatic move and say, we were wrong all these years. We're going to withdraw from these people because they are trying to destroy our people from within.
Rabbi Hollander, I'm going to give you just 1 minute to answer one very serious question for the sake of our audience. What is the difference in the ordination? Is a conservative and a reform rabbi, does he study Yeridea and the Shulchan Aruch and get the smichas chachamim or the smichas rabbonim that would ordain him as a rabbi, as an Orthodox rabbi? Or I think this is one of the very important, significant points that we should tell to the world, the difference, not only in the style of services, but I think there's something more to it.
To the best of my knowledge, I do not believe they have that kind of training. But let us assume that one would be ordained and would be a scholar. It is not learning that counts, but belief in God and commitment to His Torah, and there they surely have no record to stand on.
Rabbi Hollander, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, because of the fact that time has been so short, a half hour with Rabbi Hollander is like 2 minutes for somebody else, we have to, I've asked the rabbi to do me a favor and come back tomorrow night, because I do want to speak to him about his travels to Russia and Africa and Australia and Brazil and Poland and Romania and Czechoslovakia. And there are so many interesting things that this man has to tell us. And I'm sure that there are many beautiful stories that he's going to relate to us about his experiences in these different countries and that which he has gone through. Rabbi Hollander, you've been a delight. You've been a great inspiration. I'm sure a lot of people are not going to sleep for many hours tonight, but nevertheless, we'll forgive you for it, because With Jewish Youth speaks and tells the story just as it is. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been so happy to have you in our audience tonight. We're glad that you've been able to hear this program, and if you have any comments, why don't you write to me or write directly to Rabbi Hollander? You can write care of this station, WEVD, 1700 Broadway, New York, or to With Jewish Youth, 824 Eastern Parkway, Brooklyn, New York. If you want more information, 778-4600. You can call in the morning. We'll be happy to give you the information that you need. And until tomorrow at the same time, may God bless you all.